Hi everyone! This is a tutorial about placing hair cards using modifiers in Blender. I always struggled placing cards manually, so I found a way to do it more procedurally. Here you can see the final result in Unreal Engine. For this tutorial, I'm using the Hair Tool add-on. I will leave the link in the description. Even though I'm using this add-on, this tutorial is about placing the hair cards. So I will assume you have some knowledge about the tool and I won't go deep on how to use it. The first step is to sculpt the hair. I do that to establish the volume, shape, and flow. Ideally, you would have gathered some references and sculpted the hairstyle you needed. Once I'm happy with the sculpt, I split the hair into 3 parts. I do that because each part has a different flow and it's easier for the hair cards to follow edges that flow in a similar way. So as you can see, we have a part for the left, the right, and the front. Hair Tool comes with some nice features like materials and UVs. Before starting create hair cards, I like to set the UVs for each different hair card. To do that, we will create some hair cards to be able to have more options in the menu. So I'm gonna click here on Curves from Grid Surface. Then as you can see, we have some hair cards here. We are not gonna do anything with that yet, so I'm gonna go and click on UV editing. So here, as you can see, there is this image that's provided from Hair Tool. If you don't have it or you don't see it, just click on the image here and look for the hairstrip3.png. So here I'm going to establish the different hair cards so the different hair strands for each different hair card. So you want to click here on hair UV. So here you can see like the first hair card with ID 0 is already set for this hair strand. So I'm gonna just edit it a little bit to give more space on the roots. And then I'm gonna do the same for the following. I want probably I'm gonna use like 4 or 5 layers. So let's create another rectangle here. So that's gonna be ID 1. Then this one doesn't have too much density. Probably I'm gonna use it for a later layer or the flyaways. Then for the next density, I'm gonna use this one. Then this one, and then I think finally we can probably do this one and the last one. So the last 2 are gonna be on more on the surface, so that's why you want less density of the texture. Usually they are gonna be for the flyaways hair. So once we are happy with setting those UVs, we press enter to assign them and we are ready. Then I'm gonna remove this layer of hair cards that we don't want. And as you can see, when you create hair cards, the Hair Tool changes the preview to wire. So I'm gonna turn it back, but yeah, that's gonna happen every time. So here I wanted to show you a couple of things. You can see the topology here. It's very basic, and you have to keep in mind a couple of things. First of all, you need to have quads. So even if you do a very rough retopology, you want to keep everything nice in quads, because otherwise the Hair Tool is not gonna work. The second thing you want to have is these sharp edges here, and this is telling the Hair Tool where the hair cards should start and where or how they should flow, following the rest of the edges. So once we have done that for all our for the rest of the groups, we can start creating the layering. This technique requires a lot of preparation, but once it's done, the hair card placement will be very fast. I create the layering because it's very important to avoid overlapping and add variety. Each layer will have different coverage and different UVs. I like to rename each layer to be very clear as we progress, because we will have lots of layers and can get messy really quick. So the first layer has these modifiers. Has a subdivision modifier to make the shape smoother. If I turn it off here, you can see we have these like very sharp edges here, or very polygonal edges, and we want to avoid that. So I add some subdivision. You can go and add more to make it even smoother. That doesn't affect the quality of the hair, that just affects the way the hair is placed. Then I have a shrink wrap modifier, and this is to ensure that the roots are stuck on the scalp. To do that, if I click here, I can show you I have created a vertex group for the roots, that it's just this vertex here. So when I'm on the modifier, I'm telling the modifier just to affect this vertex group. And then the last modifier I have is the smooth modifier. This is very optional. Maybe you need it if you go with a very rough topology. I usually have it because the smooth modifier helps to evenly distribute the topology, so the quads are a little bit nicer, but as I said, it's not required, it's just optional. So once I have the first layer, we can start creating the next layers. Another thing I want to point, it's as you can see here, I try to be very clear with the naming for the layers. So we are in layer 0 for the front, right and left, and then this first layer are gonna have the UV 0. So let's start with layer 1. So what I do, I just duplicate, Shift D, duplicate, then I'm gonna rename that UV1, and then we're gonna keep the same modifiers and add a new one, another shrink wrap, and this time we want to change the snap mode to surface, above surface, and then target, it's not going to be the scalp, the target is going to be our layer 0. So right now we don't see any difference, but then we are going to add a separation here with the offset. And as you can see already, the layer 1 has this, well, it's offset from the layer 0. Maybe we don't want that much, so we need to adjust that accordingly, probably 0, 1, because we want the layers to be very close, but to not touch each other. And then the other thing I want to be sure, because let's see that again. As you can see here, our roots are getting separated from the scalp. So that's why we created on layer 0, and because we duplicated layer 1, it's going to have the same vertex group. What we want to do is go to the vertex group and do roots and impairs. As you can see here, I created 2 vertex group, but since we are doing the inverse of the selection, we don't need really this one. And then that's layer 1. I'm gonna change the offset to 0. And that's what we want. Then layer 2, same thing. I rename the layer, and then for our target, we want UV1. So again, I'm just checking that we are keeping some distance from the layers. Then duplicate again. That's gonna be layer 3. Change the target to layer 2. Duplicate again. Layer 4. Well, you get the idea. So we end up having we want to have 5 layers per group. So as you can see, as I was saying before, if you don't get a little bit organized and you don't have a good reference for each layer, it gets very, very confusing. Once we have all the layers for all the groups, we are ready to create the haircuts. The idea is always to go from bigger and fewer haircuts for more coverage to smaller and more haircuts for less coverage. This creates more variety, complexity, and depth, making the hair look more natural. So for layer 0, we are going to have the bigger haircuts with a more dense texture. The idea is the first layer should cover all the scalp possible. We have to play with the width and the quantity. That will establish our starting point. Then go to your hair tool tab, and we are gonna create curves from the grid surface. So here we want, as I was saying, we want to have bigger haircuts and less amount. So what I'm gonna do, it's here we are at 0.08 width, and we have 6 haircuts. So I'm gonna try to reduce this number to see them better and see how we how wide is the haircuts. And the haircuts look pretty wide here. Maybe we can go a little bit smaller. That looks kind of okay. And then we can add maybe 5. So we have 5 haircuts at 0.05. And then the points per strand, that's the quality of the haircuts. So more points are gonna end up being more polygons. So you want to be careful with this. I'm gonna show you, for example, if I have very little, with 6 points per strand, you can see like we are losing. It's like so low quality that there is not enough geometry for the hair to follow properly our curves. So we want to play with this, and I usually, for the coverage, probably I start 20. Another technique that you can use when you are done, it's when you have all your haircuts, it's if you have too much vertex or too many polygons, you can always decimate the hair. But that's more like in the optimizing part. So okay, let's go with this. So 0.05 it's gonna be our starting point, and just to keep that in mind. And then we can always preview how is it looking. As you can see, there is not much coverage here, but that's probably because by default the material is selecting random cards. So we want to unclick here, and then we want to set our region to 0. And I like to do 0 and that other 0. That the only thing that the second number does, it's it flips the UVs, so you get more variation, which I think is very nice. Okay, so we have layer 0. I'm gonna hide the mesh, and then we can add our next layer. So again, here what I want to do is I want to reduce a little bit. So maybe let's go for 0.4. So we have narrower cards, but then I want to add a little bit more. I think that can work. Let's show the preview. Then again, we are gonna want to unclick here and then set to 1. And little by little we are getting more coverage. Let's do the same for level 2. I like to switch between this view and the textures to see what I'm doing and the overlapping. If you see that you start to get a lot of overlapping like here, we can play a little bit with the offset. So we can do maybe, let's do 2. So we get less overlapping. I mean, to have this overlapping here, it's not that bad. At the end of the day, the hair, natural hair gets like it overlaps as well, but the issue with overlapping sometimes it creates weird shades, weird shadows, and some weird stuff. But Unreal has a nice feature to avoid those artifacts. I'm gonna leave it at 0.03, 0.003. Okay, so let's create the hair cards. As you can see, there is less overlapping now. That's because the hair cards don't follow strictly the shape of the mesh. So I want to reduce that again, maybe 0.003, then add a little bit more. Then you can always play with, if you want to add more variety, obviously you can play with the randomizing space, the length. I mean, there is plenty of settings that you can play with and make that even more natural looking. Here the same thing, we are gonna do 2 and 2. So little by little you can see like it's covering more hair, it's looking kind of very good. Let's do 3. Here I'm gonna offset that a little bit more. Let's do 3 again. Hair cards, I'm gonna reduce that to 0.2 and maybe add more of them. Another thing that is very important that I forgot to mention is to click this align tile. That what does it aligns the hair cards with your mesh. If you don't do that, I'm gonna show you, then you see the hair cards kind of do what they want. I mean, they follow a different flow, not a different flow, but like they aren't aligned with the mesh, and we want to have the hair cards following the mesh. Here that's 3. So we have 5 layers. I'm gonna add one more layer. So let me add, to add one more layer, I'm gonna select the last layer, Shift D to duplicate, change the name, and then change the target to layer 4. Okay, and I'm gonna use these ones to add more like variety. So for 4, Let's create the curves. That's gonna be, maybe I'm gonna do 0. Well, yeah, we can, because I'm gonna leave it, I'm gonna leave the same, and I'm gonna show, instead of adding many to cover, here we want to start to create more variety on the surface of the hair to make it look more natural. So I'm gonna add less. Maybe instead of 002, sorry, I'm gonna do it a little bit wider, and then I'm gonna add some little curls just to make it a little bit more kind of messy looking. So here, when you add curls, obviously you can see it's like a big mess here, but it's really easy to fix. Just change the radius to something smaller. That's probably too small, we don't even see. But here you can start see, okay, it's curling here. But I want maybe less curls and affecting more. So what I'm gonna change, first of all, I'm gonna add more randomization here. And what I want to do is the offset. Let's play with this. So as you can see, the offset was at 0.5. That meant that the curl started at the half of the hair. So now it's starting like a 1/3. And I want to reduce the curl. I don't want it so curly. So maybe 2. This is just to add more like, to make it look more natural. I'm gonna hide that. And then we can preview, set to 4. Remember, 4 was starting to look very like not that dense hair. So as you can see here, we start to get this like nice variation here, like the hair, it's more separated from the hair strands, and that it's what makes the hair look more like, you can see here, that makes the hair look much more natural, because hair, it's not perfect, and it's not just one big volume, and the surface creates a lot of variation. Last one is going to be layer 5, and we are going to do exactly the same here. Because that's the last layer, we could even add more like offset. Could go a little bit, not too crazy, but, and then we create the curves from the root surface, and these ones we can make them smaller again, probably add a little bit more. That was 002. Okay, and then change the region to 5. You can see here our hair, it's looking pretty good. So once you're happy with your hair, you can select all the layers and then click on finalize hair. This is going to convert the curves in hair cards, because right now if I go to edit mode, you can see here it's all curves, and you could go and make manual adjustments. I mean, this technique is just to quick place hair cards, but depending on what you want, you're gonna probably have to still make some adjustments manually. But so far I think it looks good. So let's click on finalize hair, and then I'm gonna move that out so I can hide the curves, and that's how that's mesh now. I can go to edit mode, and you can see here all our hair cards. And let's go and show the stats to see. So we are 3,000. I guess if I was doing the whole thing, maybe it would be like a 10,000 or so. So it's still pretty good in terms of well, depending on the game that you are doing or what you're doing, but I feel like around 10,000, if it's looking that good as that, I feel it's pretty good. Other things I do sometimes for better renders, if I just want to render, I add a surface, a subdivision here, so makes the hair like more smooth. And what I was doing before, if you need to optimize it because you went crazy with the resolution and it's too much for what you need, you can always come here and do decimate. And this is a good way because usually the general form and shape of the hair doesn't change too much. So we are 3000, and if we something crazy like 0.1, well, yeah, that's too much, but let's probably try. So yeah, half, I mean, it is still looking good. Even if you, for example, for all of these, at this distance, you could even go lower. So that's something that we can take into consideration. That was my technique to quickly place hair cards with modifiers and the hair tool add-on. I hope that was helpful. Please leave any questions in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching and see you soon.